influenced by what we expose our bodies to.
Sure. And Dr. Drake, now you said thoracic. Give me those titles.
Thoracic and cardiovascular. So I was trained in heart surgery, vascular surgery, surgery of the lungs and any organ inside your chest,
Mm.
which is the esophagus, which is the main organ that you swallow with. When the food leaves your mouth, it goes through this long tube called the esophagus.
Yes.
That happens to be in your chest. And there are a few other things in there, like your aorta, which is the main blood vessel that takes blood from the heart to everywhere else in your body, and your vena cava, which is the main vein that brings blood back into your heart. So it's a very, very busy area in your body that no one pays attention to much.
Right. Does that include the stomach as well?
Well, the stomach is not necessarily in the chest cavity, but whenever we operate or do anything to the esophagus, which is the main swallowing tube, you have to get the stomach involved because that structure, esophagus, is connected to the stomach.
Yes. And there are claims that the stomach is our second brain. Do you have any knowledge about that being true?
Well, some people do say that, but I mean, it has a very important function. As I said in the beginning, everything your body needs has to pass through
Mm.
that stomach generally.
Yes.
Of course, there are a few people we can put it in their veins, but that's not the normal way of people to function. So everything your body needs has to go through your stomach. And when it gets there, the stomach has to do things to it to make it like available and acceptable so that it can be absorbed. And so if the stomach doesn't work well,
Mm.
you will suffer from malnutrition. I don't care how much you eat.
Wow. And that's a really important point because there are many of us that have digestive issues.
Right.
And you see in the grocery stores nowadays, one of the biggest areas of over-the-counter drugs are digestive aids.
Absolutely.
What is going on first with what has caused us to have such challenge or the challenges that we do in our stomach?
Well, it's a plethora of things, but starting with the most simple things. When your stomach is that organ that collects all the food that you eat.
Mm-hmm.
It sits there in the stomach, and then your stomach makes special acids to help digest that food.
Yes.
Digestion is a fairly complex process, but it starts in your mouth. And from your mouth, it passes through that tube called the esophagus in your chest. It only takes about 1 minute to pass through that tube, but then it gets into your stomach and it's there for, depending on what type of food it is, it may be there for several hours. Like fruits, they're there for 30 minutes. Other things may be there, meat and stuff, there for 2, 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And during the process it's there, the stomach makes acids to help cut the proteins and break them down into their component amino acids so that they can be absorbed. In addition, while it's there in the stomach, it stimulates other organs like the pancreas to make the necessary hormones, lipase, amylase, and those kind of hormones to help digest that food. That pancreas also reacts to the amount of carbohydrate in the food, because if there's a lot of sugar in the food, then the pancreas gets a message to make insulin, which helps to digest the carbohydrate in that food. So the stomach is like the central, epicenter of where the food goes and then sends messages to other parts of the body. So when it doesn't function well, you don't digest well.
Yes. Okay. That's key. And I think the challenges that cause us to need the antacids and other products are as a result of what causes us to then
To need antacids, right? Usually, and since the stomach's job is to make acids to digest food. And if you know anything about pH is a measurement of how acidic a situation is. And the fluids in the stomach tends to have a pH of about 3, which is pretty low because normal pH, what we call neutral, is 7.
Mm-hmm.
Anything over 7 is considered basic. Anything under 7 is considered acidic. So 5 is acidic, but 3 is very acidic. And that's how the stomach likes to be, around 3. However, if the stomach has any kind of injury, if it's damaged, if it is having bacteria like Helicobacter pylori and other bacteria that create problems in the stomach, then there are open damaged areas, and the acid irritates those areas and make your life very uncomfortable. Every time you try to digest something, you get a lot of pain from the burning caused by the acid which the stomach naturally makes. So that's why all those medications, those antacids, are given to neutralize the acid in your stomach so that you can stop the burning that people, it's called heartburn, gastric burn, reflux. All that is part of that burning process. But that's natural for the stomach to make acid. So if there's any injury in the stomach, any kind of irritation, it's going to burn.
Yes, yes. And I know the stomach is not a part of, is it that it's not a part of the thoracic region of the body?
It's not in the thoracic region, it's just below.
Yes.
However, sometimes you might have heard of people having a condition called a hiatal hernia.
Yes.
A hiatal hernia is a situation where that tube I told you about called esophagus, when it leaves your mouth and your throat, it brings the food down that tube. It's about 20, 30 centimeters long, and it dumps the food into the stomach just below your diaphragm. Sometimes there's a little space in the diaphragm that the esophagus passes through. Sometimes that space gets so big that the stomach can migrate up out of the abdominal cavity into the chest cavity, and then it's called an esophageal hernia. Those kinds of problems would put part of the stomach up into your chest.
Wow. Okay. The food that we eat, and you're from Barbados, I would suspect that you spent some time there. Maybe
Yes.
you went through, what do you call it, secondary education, or primary education rather, and coming here to Howard University. I bet you when you were in Barbados, back when you were a child, there weren't as many people sick as they are.
No. In fact, I was telling someone that this week, I was saying that when I was growing up, I left Barbados as a teenager, but when I was growing up, I cannot recall anyone that I've met that had Alzheimer's or any of those things that are so common today.
Right.
I don't remember ever being around an autistic kid. I've seen kids with Down syndrome,
Yes.
but I don't remember being around a kid with autism. And so it kind of makes you wonder, where did that thing come from?
Right, right. Now, you being on the medical side, the allopathic side, and having to, you're still practicing.
Yes.
And I would suspect that you're, as most of us are, I need the resources that come through my restaurant and through the other activities. We don't want to threaten that by asking you one of those questions that make you say, well, if I tell you the truth, if I tell you the truth, I don't know that I'll have a spot. My office might not be there when I get back. But I would just ask you, what are your thoughts on autism and some of these new diseases that have come about? Where does that come from?
There are several speculations as to how they arise. I will say that 20 years ago, autism was maybe 1 in every 300 kids. 25 years ago. Nowadays, it's down to 1 in every 68 or 74 kids, depending on whose statistic you come across. But it's now less than 100 kids.
Wow.
You will get a kid with autism. And so they've been looking at so many sources. Some parents have decided that it's because of vaccinations, and so they don't want their kids to be vaccinated. Other parents have decided that is because of something else. But so there are all these competing bits of information, none of which have been certified. But I will say this, that it has been shown that lead toxicity creates some of those problems. It has been shown that that exposure to too much aluminum, exposure to too much copper, and too much iron can create. And in fact, the one thing that is consistent, that the scientists have shown beyond a shadow of a doubt, that obese mothers have higher rates of autism in their kids.
Mm.
Mothers that are obese have kids with a higher rate of autism.
Wow, wow, that's interesting. And there are other, not just at the point of birth or when they're being vaccinated, but we're seeing our children now are coming down with high blood pressure and
Right.
diabetes, and it used to be called adult onset diabetes,
Right.
and now they had to change that because now kids were getting it, so now they just call it type 2 diabetes.
Exactly.
Can you explain why?
Why? Okay, we think and we've looked at it very carefully. Diabetes is a disease that has to do with blood sugar, as you know.
Yes.
And as I said earlier in the conversation, when you put food into your stomach, and the food has a lot of carbohydrate, as that carbohydrate is broken down into the respective sugars, the sugar in the blood goes up. Once that happens, the pancreas, which is that organ just behind your stomach, automatically start making diabetes. And it does that consistently. And that insulin, it makes insulin, I
Yes.
should say,
Mhm.
and that insulin gets into the bloodstream in response to the elevated carbohydrate or sugars in the blood, and it forces the carbohydrate into the cell or into the liver where it is stored as glycogen. In a normal functioning person, that's what happens. If you eat something, sugar goes up. Once it gets high in the blood, a message goes out. The pancreas makes extra insulin that sends a message to drive the sugar into the cells or into storage. What happened with the adult onset diabetes, now called type 2, is that the insulin that you make, your cells do not respond to it. So you're considered insulin resistant. So even though you make the insulin, the cells don't respond. So now you're having the high blood sugar, the pancreas makes the insulin, but the insulin doesn't work. Insulin is like a key
Yes.
that opens the door of the cell to let sugar in. And what is happening, your key isn't working anymore. So the insulin isn't working. You're considered insulin resistant. So that's what they call type 2 diabetes. It used to be called adult onset, but as you said, there are now children in middle school, 12, 13-year-old kids, getting that exact same diabetes, which is different from type 1 diabetes, which used to be called juvenile onset diabetes, which is a different problem. That's only maybe 5 to 8% of all the diabetics are type 1 diabetics. And what happens in that situation, the pancreas no longer can make insulin because the cells called beta cells, which make the insulin, are now damaged or destroyed by some inflammatory situation. We're not sure if it is autoimmune. We think it is. And those cells no longer are functional, so you cannot make any more insulin. And so you have insulin deficient or type 1 diabetes. And it's very different from type 2. Type 2, you make insulin, but the insulin doesn't work.
Okay, I get it. And the reality that we're seeing this now happen in our youth, at like you said, adolescence. What would then be the cause of that in your
Right.
estimation?
What the statistics have shown and demographics have shown that when you there are 5 criteria. We call it, well, prior to diabetes, there's a syndrome called metabolic syndrome. Some literature call it syndrome X. And what it is, there are 5 criteria. And if you have 3 of those criteria, you're considered having metabolic syndrome. And those criteria are like hypertension or a high blood pressure, high obesity. In other words, if your waist for a male is more than 40 or for a female more than 35, that's one strike. That's one of the 3 strikes against you. If your blood pressure is up, that's another strike. If your cholesterol is high, that's a 3rd strike. If your triglycerides are high, that's another strike. So once you have any 3 of the 5 strikes, you're considered to have metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome, beyond a shadow of a doubt, leads to diabetes and the complications of diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and stroke, those kinds of things. So obesity, we found, is one of the major indicators, because if you are obese not only will you have an elevated weight, but you tend to have an elevated lipid level, triglycerides, and cholesterol, and that's three strikes right there. And if you have those three, you have metabolic syndrome, which also leads to a condition that we call pre-diabetes. I don't know if you ever heard of it,
Yes.
but pre-diabetes is a condition, and they have certain criteria. If your blood sugar when you're fasting after you slept all night is greater than 85 or something, that's considered a pre-diabetic level. Once it's less than 100 but greater than 85. And if it's more than 100 after fasting all night, you're considered being diabetic. The other thing they measure is something called the glucose attached
A1C?
A1C, glucose attached onto the hemoglobin A1C.
Yeah.
And there's a criteria. If it's more than 5.7, anywhere between 5.7 and 6.4, you're considered to be in the pre-diabetic range. If it is less than 5.7, you're considered okay. If it is between 5.8 and 6.4, you're pre-diabetic, and over 6.4 consistently, you're diabetic.
Wow. And I've got people that are calling me. As a matter of fact, there's a young lady who has been consistently calling me and saying that she is resistant to the medication. The medication is not working for her, and her levels sometimes get up to, she'll have a sugar level of 1100.
Oh my goodness, that is very, 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 very high. Anytime, in fact, in the hospital, when we see patients with blood sugars over 500, we get very panicked and start putting them on other medications to lower that blood sugar. Because what happens is this: there's a physiologic problem going on. You're getting the blood sugar in your blood. Your body's not making or not responding to the insulin to lower it. To the insulin to lower the blood sugar. When blood sugar does not get into the cell cannot make the necessary energy to keep functional, because it uses sugar to make a certain substance called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. That's the energy thing that every cell needs 24/7. So what it does, when you can't get carbohydrate into the cell to make ATP, it goes through a process where it takes fat to make ATP. But as you make fat into ATP, it generates something called ketones. And ketones, when it gets very high, creates an acidic condition, and people sometimes go into a coma when the ketones are so high, and it's called ketoacidosis, which is a problem that affects a lot of diabetics whose blood sugar stay up at that level. Ketoacidosis, and that's because the body cannot use the carbohydrate, so it's using fat to generate energy. And when it uses fat, the byproducts of fat is ketones. So people with a blood sugar over 500-600, we generally put them in the intensive care.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I can understand. And this is, again, one of those illnesses, one of those health challenges that you didn't see in Barbados. And I don't know how long you've been in the States. How long have you been?
47 years.
Okay, so you were here at a time when diabetes wasn't like on the top of the charts with regard to what was affecting us. What do you think it is that happened that all of a sudden pushed diabetes up, and you started seeing it now so prevalent in so many folks?
Okay, just to make another point too, before I tell you, now in Barbados and in throughout the whole Caribbean, that is now a major problem. It's the leading cause of amputation in the Caribbean area, and in fact, worldwide, they expect something like 300 million people will develop diabetes by 2025 worldwide. But here's, I think, is the principal cause of this upsurge in diabetes. One, we are eating foods that create problems for our bodies. Processed carbohydrate, for example. When you eat a fruit, there's sugar in that fruit, but those sugars are so complicated and complex and attached to fiber, you don't get the sugar rush that you would get if you drank a can of soda. If you drank a can of soda, in 2 minutes, the sugar is in your bloodstream. And we see this in the hospital all the time. We have patients in the hospital who become hypoglycemic. That means their blood sugar goes low. When the blood sugar goes low, we don't give them an apple or an orange. We give them a glass of juice. And in 5 minutes, the blood sugar is back up. If you give them an apple, it would take 2 or 3 hours to get the blood sugar back up because the sugar in the apple or the orange is not released as rapidly because of the attachment to fiber and all that has to be broken down and partially digested by the stomach and so on. So they give you juice where there's free sugar floating around and it spikes your blood sugar immediately. So the foods we're eating, processed flour, for instance, is one of the biggest culprits because when you process flour, you take so much stuff out of it that all that's left is carbohydrate. And so when you eat that, it drives your blood sugar up very, very quickly, and that creates a problem. Now, there are many other things that can damage also the pancreas that makes the insulin. Those things can happen also. But for instance, there was a condition where people get a certain viral infection, and certain viral infections like mumps or something could also damage the pancreas. So that's possible, but that's not the most common reason. The most common reason is the foods are too full of processed carbohydrate, and it drives the blood sugar up every time you eat. So the pancreas is constantly pumping out insulin. After a while, like any other good mechanism, any other good functioning structure, it starts to mess up. It gets tired.
Yes, yes, and we see that you talked about the autoimmune side of this, and does that I have read, and I may be wrong, so correct me please, that it has something to do with a protein that is also found in dairy.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, they did research on that, and they found there's a protein in milk products, for instance, a very large protein. It's called casein. Casein, and it's a very large protein. And here's what happens in kids. A kid is not a fully functional human being. All their systems are not up to maximum working capacity. So, of course, if you have a 3-month-old child and you're giving them that kind of food, of course, they now have to try to process that food. Now, here's what happens when your body tries to break down dairy. The protein is so long, it doesn't always break it down into the individual amino acids. So then it makes chunks of proteins. These chunks of protein are long strings of amino acids attached together, and some of them get into the bloodstream. And once they do that, this is the current theory, once those things get into the bloodstream, your body sees them as an invading organism and they make antibodies against that protein, just trying to keep it under control. Just like if you got an infection with a bacteria, your body sees that bacteria and makes antibodies to fight that bacteria. Then it makes the antibodies against that protein that gets into the bloodstream. Some of those antibodies, because of the structure of the protein, damages the beta cells in the pancreas and destroys them. And so a lot of the pediatric scientists are saying the beta cells of children are destroyed while they're still 2 and 3 and 4 years old. And so they become what they call juvenile diabetics, because, or type 1 diabetics, because the beta cells can no longer make any insulin. And they have linked that to kids who have been fed dairy products early. And so one of the recommendations now made by most pediatricians, not to feed your child dairy product until after the age of 2, if you have to do it at all.
Yes.
Because you really don't have to do it.
Right. And take us back to, again, Barbados. You growing up as a child and you seeing auntie and grandma and your mother, you know, was it common that mom and auntie would go to the grocery store and get a can of some type of soy or milk formula for the child, or was breastfeeding pretty common?
Oh, breastfeeding was the most common way of raising children. Absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Breastfeeding was the most common way. Now, we use milk in very small quantities. We made, as you got older, they made a thing called porridge, made from cornmeal and different things. And in that mixture, they would put a spoonful of what they call condensed milk. That was it. And they would stir that spoonful of milk into that porridge, and that was your meal for the day.
Wow.
You understand? They did not No one ever drank a glass of milk.
And now it's suggested, of course, by the dairy industry, how
Of
clever,
course.
that we consume 24 ounces of either, milk or cheese or eggs or something in that space, because the body needs, I guess, the protein and the calcium or whatever it is that they're getting out of milk nowadays.
I got news for you on that.
Talk to me.
I got news for you.
Mhm.
This is a big story, but let me talk about the calcium first. The calcium from milk is not the best calcium for a human being, simply because the milk comes with so much acid that the body has to neutralize that acid. And in neutralizing the acid, sometimes it has to take calcium from your bone to neutralize the acid just to handle the cow's milk. That's one problem. The second problem I find is that the other proteins that go along with milk, as I mentioned earlier, casein, and then there's a sugar called lactose that 90% of people of African descent are sensitive to. By the age of 3, 90% of the people of African descent no longer make lactase, which is the enzyme that digests lactose. So you go drink milk, you will start having signs and symptoms like gas or burping or something, and you don't pay a lot of attention. Some people don't get that anymore. They get pain in their knees and pain in their hips and pain in their elbow, and they think it's arthritis. It's really a reaction to lactose intolerant also. So lactose intolerant is very common in people of African descent, and in fact, there's the ethnic group worse than us. That ethnic group are really Chinese. And I would always tell people, if you go to a Chinese restaurant, I'm talking about a real Chinese restaurant, not an American Chinese restaurant, and you see people serving milk products, you come and get me. I don't think you'll see that in a real Chinese restaurant because they can't tolerate milk either.
Right.
And that's true of Japanese and people from that Asian subculture. They're not very large consumers of milk products. The other problem with milk is this, and see, when we were made as human beings, our mother's milk was supposed to give us the things we need to grow. And we should double our weight. The average human baby doubles the weight in about 6 months, maybe 7. And that's far different to a cow. A cow doubles his weight in 3 months. So the protein and the stuff in the cow's milk is there to help that baby cow double his weight. Do you know that a rat doubles its weight in 4 days?
Wow.
So the milk from that mother rat is to help that baby rat doubles his weight. But if I started giving my baby rat's milk, it's going to cause a problem for my baby because it's not designed for a human baby. Just like a cow's milk was not designed for a human baby. It was designed for a cow. And my final point on that I think people should think about if they haven't thought about it is, have you ever seen a baby cow waiting at your mother's door trying to get her milk?
Right.
So why are we at their door getting their milk every day?
Sure.
It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
It is not necessary.
Right. And is it true with the when you think about the okay, we're gonna close that door. Yeah. And is it true that the calf, the baby calf, at a point in its development, it no longer is able to break down the mother's milk?
Absolutely. No longer able to break down the mother's milk. So that cow no longer drinks milk. Right?
Yes. Keep talking.
That cow goes off and eat grass and leaves and all of the other things that cows eat. Like horses do the same. And I always tell people this, have you ever looked at those animals? Look at some of the biggest animals in the world, elephants and giraffes and right now. They only eat vegetation.
Yep.
And they weigh 10,000 pounds.
Yep.
And they live to be 90 years old. And they got memory that never fails. Mm-hmm. And they got all these positive things. And I tell a guy once, if you can outrun a horse, you come and get me. A horse can run a mile in probably a minute and 20 seconds.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Maybe 2 minutes. The best human may get 3 minutes and 40-something seconds.
Okay.
And horse only eat vegetation. So I'm telling you, there's something going on there.
Yes.
That we need to start paying some strict attention to.
In your field of study, and those that are experts in the allopathic science, you don't find many people who are taking the position that you're taking. You're the odd man out if you're telling people that dairy may not be the best thing for us to consume. And I can imagine there are many doctors that are saying, well, you make sure your child is getting enough milk every day so that they have strong teeth and healthy bones. That's the tagline for the commercials. And many of the doctors are telling these parents of children that they need to make sure that they're getting sufficient quantities so that they can grow up to be strong and healthy. Well, validity, is questionable because we realize that this is marketing. But, now to find out that they're actually damaging people is a whole nother, is a whole nother something. And what happens when you step into a room or you're doing your lecture and other medical doctors are there and they're scratching their head? Well, that's not what I was taught.
Right.
How does that work with you and your colleagues?
Well, it's changing. And I have to tell you that, in fact, there is a medical school, one that I know of for sure, and I think there are one or two others that have now adopted a philosophy that no one will graduate from their medical school without getting a full course in nutrition.
Great.
I know that school in Louisiana, I can't remember the name of it now. It's in New Orleans, Tulane. Okay. They have a program where you cannot graduate from the medical school without studying nutrition.
Great.
It's no longer just a 3-credit course. You have to do a full course of nutrition before you can graduate from that school. And some of the schools are beginning to switch their mode. They realize that nutrition is the best medicine. Yep. It's the best way of sustaining life. And so even allopathic medicine is making the switch.
So how does that work for the pharmaceutical drug industry that in large part is funding, this scientific push? Because they're the ones that can fund the laboratories and
right.
and pay these researchers to do all of this work. They're not going to be interested in pulling back on pharmaceuticals and increasing nutrition.
Right, and that is something that those universities will have to work out as time goes on. But I will tell you that it is becoming almost standard understanding that nutrition is probably one of the most important things a person can experience in their lives. And the sooner you get people on a healthy nutrition path, the better they are going to do. Here's an example. You remember former President Bill Clinton?
Yes.
Remember he'd had heart surgery 2 times, and he's had this and had complications and so on. And some years ago, I saw him on CNN being interviewed by Wolf Blitzer, and he said, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he switched his life just by changing his nutrition. And he went to standard allopathic doctors.
Yes.
He went to doctors at Mayo Clinic and doctors at Cleveland Clinic and these kind of places. And there are many doctors there who now follow this same path I'm talking about. They're no longer the typical, let's use drugs for everything.
Sure.
You understand?
Sure.
And the one thing they found out, and this is scientific research that found this out, if you give a person cow's milk to raise their calcium, it creates problems with acidosis and other things, not to mention lactose intolerance and all the other things that go along with that cow's milk. You actually get more calcium from a serving of kale. Human beings do. You get more readily available calcium from a serving of kale than from a glass of milk.
Okay.
And this is scientifically proven.
Great. Well, I'm glad to see that the industry is beginning to shift, because there are a lot of us that are no longer here, and there are a lot of us that are sick today because the industry was, stayed steadfast in believing that no, you keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry about any of this. Take this glucophage or take whatever it is that we've got for you, and it's going to be all right.
Right.
You expect to be on this for the rest of your life, but you'll be all right. Another big issue, and I want to expand our conversation. I want to bring someone else into our conversation momentarily, but I want to talk about obesity. Okay. Obesity, when I was in school, and I'm sure your experience was much different, because when I used to go and visit the islands as a child, everybody looked like they were slim and trim like you. Everybody was slim and trim, looked like they just got off the soccer field. They were, they were so fit, and they were walking, even to the extent of they were walking barefoot.
Right.
And I was accustomed to walking with shoes. Never knew a thing walking barefoot, except if I was at the beach, and that was from my towel to the water. But, walking barefoot, slim and trim, fit, eyes were bright, teeth were bright, they looked healthy, they were vibrant, they were alert. And all of a sudden now, I'm here in the United States of America. I remember there was one overweight person in my whole school. Right. The whole school, we had 10 grades. There was one overweight person that was obviously, had a weight issue. There were others that were a little chunky, but there was one person that was overweight. And now in schools, when I go and I speak at these schools, it's like so many. The percentage has to be easily 30-40% of the students are overweight, and probably 10-15% of those are morbidly obese. What is it that has caused this? And I'm driving us down the road to this point. There has to be some point, and then there's a reason, and then there's somebody or something behind it. But let's start with just obesity. What's the cause? What's going on?
Okay, I'll say this, as you said. I went to an all-boys school, and we had 500 plus boys in my school, and there was not one fat person that I've ever seen in my life. And that's an interesting observation. The big thing that worked was that people ate real food. Let me repeat what I just said. People ate real food. They didn't eat processed food. Right. They didn't eat synthetic food. When I grew up, people ate real food. The other thing that they did that was very different, they walked everywhere or rode a bicycle. You understand?
Yes.
People didn't drive cars much. You understand? They may take a bus every once in a while, but it was quicker to walk because you can walk through the back roads and the back alleys and get where you're going. So people, rather than wait 1 hour for a bus, by the time that bus came, you would have been there walking. So people walked everywhere or rode a bicycle everywhere. Plus they ate real food. What's happening now in our culture, and by the way, the statistics are worse than you said. More people are obese than you would say. It's close to 70% of people are either overweight or obese, and they use the body mass index to classify them. Anywhere between 19 and 24.9 is considered normal. Well, there's a significant number of people between 25 and 30. They're all obese. And then those over 30, they're called morbidly obese. And so when you put all those numbers together, it is more closer to 70% in this country than anywhere else. And they see that more in the so-called industrialized nations, because in the so-called third world nations, people are still eating real food. You understand? They're not eating as much processed food. They're eating real food. So the main cause of obesity is the foods we eat, the processed foods. And I'll give you an example. I can give a kid right now a sandwich and a soda, and by the time I'm finished with him and that sandwich, he probably has 800 calories for lunch. Now multiply that by 3 times, and he has 2,400 calories in a day. That should not be the calorie limit of a kid who's in, 9th grade, but that's what the average is, because they drink 2 or 3 of those sodas every day.
Every day.
And some people drink more.
Yes.
And this is what the problem has continued to be. The processing of the food just make it calorie dense and nutritionally depleted.
Yes. And we're seeing that across the board.
Across the board.
That we're eating, I think they call them now empty calories.
That's basically what it is. A bunch of calories, but nothing else.
No nutrition. And I've got names for the places, and you all in the listening audience know them. It's Crack Donald's and Murder King and Taco Hell and Wind Disease and Chokers. I remember those names. And Bow Strangles and the International House of Pulmonary Heart Disease.
I have to remember those names. Oh,
yes,
my goodness.
Yes, indeed. What I'd like to do is we're actually going to get our engineer, and he's gonna expand our camera view a bit, and we're going to bring in a guest to this conversation. So I need your help with getting our engineer in here, if you don't mind, and we're going to go forward with that. But what I'd like to do as we continue down the road of the conversation about obesity, and so this all started, I guess in the 80s, we started seeing people getting a little bigger. And we started seeing vehicles get a little bigger too. They made vehicles to fit the people because people couldn't fit in those little vehicles. They made church pews to fit the people, so they had to extend the
car seats and everything.
Everything, you're right, because babies were even bigger then.
That's right.
And still, so what do we see as the future? Because I'm not seeing less obesity. Maybe they're dying. But I don't see people slimming down a lot. I see more health clubs, more fat, more diets, more fad diets. You see marketed and promoted. What outside of the real food category do we need to send out as a message to people in order to get this, or is that just it?
No, you got to get up and get moving.
Yeah, we got to get moving. Okay.
And the getting moving part, because there are a lot of people who think they can exercise, and when they exercise, they're gonna lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise will account for 20% of your weight loss, and the other 80% comes from what you eat.
Right.
And so I would recommend get moving, because once you move, let me tell you what happens once the muscles work. Your muscles are the only things in your body, your only organs that can take in blood sugar without requiring insulin.
Okay.
Just think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Your muscles can absorb blood sugar without requiring insulin. But something else happens with your muscles. Once you exercise them, it makes a substance called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And what that does, it stimulates your brain to grow more. It reduces your incidence of dementia and Alzheimer's just by exercising those muscles. So if you want to burn sugar without having to require insulin, exercise your muscle. So my recommendation is 30 minutes a day, or if you don't have 30 minutes, do 10 minutes after every meal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You'll be set.
That's it. Doc, we're going to get you to move over a little bit so we can squeeze in our additional guest and have you switch on to this microphone here. You won't be disappointed that we brought in this guest. I guarantee you. She is a phenomenal young lady. We'll be bringing her on in just a minute. My engineer hemmed her up a bit, but she's now been released.
Like a quarterback. I love it, man. Like a quarterback.
Right. She's a free agent. But anyway.
How are you? Oh, my goodness.
All right. There you go. And we now bring into our conversation a young lady, Romalda. Romalda, thank you for coming on first.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you coming on. And we're talking to Dr. Duan Drakes. And is it Duan or Dwayne? Duan Drakes. And he is an allopathic and thoracic and cardiologist, and he's everything that all of us need, especially in our community. I'm sure he's overworked, and he had to have left his cell phone out in the car and his pager and whatever else that medical doctors have nowadays, because I'm sure, there's a whole lot of folk that are like, I'm here to get my procedure done. Because we've eaten ourselves into an awful situation. And Romalda, you've been around a little less time than maybe myself and
I've been around the same time you have.
I was trying to give you. I was trying to look older, but.
Oh my goodness!
But you've seen what's happened with the health of our community. You've been in the United States. You've been a public servant in the Washington D.C. area.
Yes.
You've watched our youth transform. What has been the cause from your perspective, and why our children, and you're a mother.
Yes.
What has been the cause from your perspective, from your angle, and the work that you've done to maintain the health of your family?
Well, I've always kept my children active. My kids range from the age of 30 down to 18.
You are lying. Doc, we gonna switch off of her because she done started off wrong. She got a 30-year-old kid.
My daughter turns 30 years old next week.
You had a baby when you were a baby,
no,
right?
No.
We've seen that on Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Thank you so much. Thank you. But I've always kept my children active. My oldest daughter and my second daughter, they were cheerleaders. My son played football, baseball, basketball. My younger two, they swam competitively. I just kept them busy, kept them, just kept them active. And as you know, I'm known as the Redskin Cupcake Lady. I do bake cupcakes, and
Yes.
I've changed things in the cupcakes to accommodate everyone, basically.
But when people are eating cupcakes, they're not necessarily, saying, well, should I eat this, kale salad, or should I eat that cupcake? When people are going for cupcakes, they're going for cupcakes.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're not making a meal out of the cupcakes.
Right.
See,
Right.
that's the thing. And I understand, like what he's saying about the sodas and things of that nature. We did that, you know, with my children and juice and things of that nature. But I've basically taken soda out of my diet, and I myself, I've been fortunate with my genes that I can't get over, I would say, 140 pounds myself, and I don't work out like I should, but I said I'm going to start. I'm definitely going to start because I know it's good for the heart. But
Great.
the kids these days, they don't exercise. A lot of them sit and they eat chips and they play video games. Back in the day, we didn't have video games like that.
Right.
When I was growing up, we Nintendo. Let me see, what was it? The Space Invaders had just come out with the what do you call that?
No,
The,
we started with Atari. The
Atari, that's it. That's what I'm saying.
thing, just
Atari,
the ball going
right.
back and
And
forth,
then it
right.
went to the Space Invaders with Atari, and that's the only thing we used to play back then. But otherwise, we were outside. We were either riding on skateboards or bikes or racing, playing kickball, dodgeball, you name it. I mean, we were doing something. We were never in the house. It's no way your parent let you sit in the house and stay idle watching TV or playing video games all day.
Right.
It's no way. Your parents be like, go outside, find something to do.
That's it.
And myself, I would go outside and I would bake mud cookies and mud pies and things of that nature. But you had to be outside playing, doing something, playing in the sandbox, doing something.
Right.
Doc, what do you have to say about just being physically active? What role does that play in this?
It is probably the more. Listen, let me tell you a story. When you were created, you're created with several hundred muscles. Several hundred. Some people say 700. You may not find them all because in some people they're wasted away, but there's a lot of muscles. And that wasn't for nothing. That was for a reason.
Right.
For you to use them. Okay? You got muscles in your arms and your shoulders and your legs and your abdomen. There are muscles everywhere. Even your hair got muscles.
Okay.
Your
So
brain,
that when
everything.
you get
right.
scared and your hair stand up on end,
Right.
it's a muscle.
Exactly.
So those muscles were there for a purpose. And when they work, when they are put to work, they do some amazing things to your body. Not just give you this great shape and all that, but as I said earlier, muscles are probably the only organs in the body that can use sugar without needing insulin. Imagine that. You can get your sugar to fall by using your muscles without using insulin. That's one point. The other thing about muscles, as I said earlier, when you exercise them, they make a protein called BDNF, brain-derived nutritropic factor, that stimulates your brain to grow. So you could be 58 years old and still have your brain growing. And this is from research that was done at Mayo Clinic and many other centers. Your brain will grow with that BDNF factor, and that is produced only when muscles work. Then, of course, those muscles of yours help. In fact, your heart is nothing more than a muscle. It beats 24/7, even when you're sleeping. It has to work, and it needs to work. If it stops, you're dead.
Right. You have a problem.
Okay? The heart is all muscle with some blood vessels sending it the oxygen and the food it needs. So moving is critical to your well-being,
Sure.
period.
Sure. Well, you know, it ties into a conversation I was having with my mother. She's 88, and I told her, I said, you know, there's a relationship between physical movement and mental clarity. You know, we have to be physical. Now I understand the connection. Now I can see what's going on. So they talked about people who were doing aerobic exercise and how they were able to even reverse or at least stall the Alzheimer's or the dementia or the other challenges mentally that many of our seniors are having. And so, we talk about, I've got to get mom out. We got to get her to an aerobics class. I'd like to see that 88-year-old out there doing the aerobics
You should take her to
workout.
water aerobics.
Water is better.
It's
for
even
that.
better for the knees.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Water
so
would be very good.
rejuvenating.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have that conversation. She's having the conversation now because she's listening. So that's good.
I would love to get her to go to water aerobics. with me.
And you know
Okay.
what? Send it to the free one. There's one down at the Sports and Learning
Yeah.
Complex.
Yes.
If you're over 65, it's free.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I look into that. You know, the diet has shifted, and not only has the diet shifted, but what is in the food has shifted. What knowledge do you have with regard to how the complexity or what is in our food has changed, which we know many times has contributed to the challenges that we have?
You would be shocked.
Uh-oh.
Let me start with something that's real popular in our community. Chicken.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You would hear people love some chicken. I have a 3-year-old grandson, and his favorite thing is chicken.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, chickens are reared in most of the country, except fortunately for the state of Maryland, which on July the 1st, 2012, they banned this substance. They give the chicken something called roxarisone, which is a compound to kill the bacteria and the parasites in their stomach so that they can grow much faster. But
Right.
roxarisone is made from arsenic.
Mm.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
the arsenic builds up in the chicken meat, and then you have a problem.
Hmm.
Because arsenic, we know, is a cancer-causing agent. Arsenic, we know, does other problems. And you've seen people who've worked in mines, who've worked underground and who've been exposed to arsenic have these kinds of problems. They put it in chicken. Maryland banned it on the 1st of July 2012, and it's the only state so far that I know that has banned roxarisone as an antibiotic to feed animals to prevent them from getting parasites so they can grow faster. So that's one problem. The other problem, I think, is that much of our food, all the animal products, they're so farm raised.
Right.
Yes.
The fish now are farm raised. And when you eat a piece of farm raised salmon, it's not like real salmon. Real salmon eat seaweed and plankton and algae to give them the nutrients they need.
Mm-hmm.
Farm raised salmon gets the same thing the horse gets and the same thing the chicken gets. So it's not real salmon anymore.
And they give them the antibiotics and things of that
That too.
nature, and then once,
Absolutely.
I mean, they're all close in kept in close, and it's just crazy.
And the
Very
water
dangerous.
and the runoff from the farmlands, the weed sprays and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
when the rain falls, it runs into the lake, and that's where the farm raised fish are.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're exposed to high concentrations of everything bad.
Right.
Hmm.
So my advice to anybody: don't eat a farm raised nothing.
Right. I
Right.
totally agree.
Right.
I
Right.
truly agree.
The food now. When we think about food, grandma's broccoli isn't today's broccoli.
No, please.
And what is it then that has happened that has damaged the food? You know, you talked about chicken, and grandma's chicken isn't today's chicken
No.
either.
Right.
But what has happened to the vegetation, the fruits and the vegetables?
Oh boy, it's such a massive story. You've heard of those big companies that do genetic modification.
Yes.
You mean
of
like
all
Monsanto?
plants. All of them.
Mhm.
What you call them again?
Monsanto?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They genetically, and the others,
Yes.
they genetically modify everything.
Yes.
Corn, soybean. I mean, you can name it, it's GMO.
Yes.
And so when you buy something that's even wheat, you know, it's so fascinating. In the Bible, they talk about wheat.
Mm-hmm.
The wheat in the Bible was called einkorn wheat. It had only 14 chromosomes. The wheat we eat today has 42 chromosomes.
Is that all? Look. Is that all? Oh my goodness.
That's 3 times the chromosomes of the original
Right.
wheat. So imagine the proteins those chromosomes code for and make. It's not just gluten anymore.
Yes.
It's other things that your body have no clue.
Wow.
The other problem that happened with genetically modified foods, they put certain genes in the food. For instance, soy, 91% of the soy sold in the United States is GMO. 91%.
Mm-hmm.
What they do, they used to put the Brazil nut was the gene that they're putting it. But there are some people who are tree nut sensitive, so they would have problems if they ate soy that had the Brazil nut.
Mm.
So they change from Brazil nut. Now they put a nightshade plant, I think it's geranium or something,
Okay.
in the soy. So when you get GMO soy, it is soy with some geranium or some other stuff in it. You understand my point, though?
Mm.
And nightshades, as a food, there are only 5 nightshade plants we can eat:
Okay.
tomato, pepper, eggplant, white potatoes, and one other. Those are nightshades. There are 3,000 other nightshade plants, and they all poison you.
Oh my goodness.
So think about that. And there's some people in those 5 we can eat that's sensitive to them.
To those.
Some people can't eat eggplant. Some people
Right.
can't eat tomatoes.
Tomatoes,
Some
right.
people can't eat peppers because they have the nightshade sensitivity.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know? You don't know sometimes until you get sick.
And
Yeah.
Some of them think that they're just allergic to like the citric acid,
No.
but it's not that. It's more than that.
It's more than that.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's just one part. The other part is they spray the foods. Now, do you know that soy made today is modified to withstand Roundup?
Yeah.
So when the planes fly over to spray the grass, they spray this Roundup stuff. It kills everything except the soy plant
Yes.
because it's genetically modified to withstand Roundup. So I tell people who grow their own vegetables and think, well, I'm growing it organic. That's fine. But if you live close enough to a place where they spray food, that spray gets into the air
Right.
and it will get on your plant when the rain falls.
Yes.
So you wash your plant very well. I don't care how organic it is.
Yes.
Okay. So these are some of the problems that makes food dangerous because the chemicals, the pesticide, the insecticide, the GMO genes, and all this stuff, you don't know what it's doing to you.
Right.
Yes.
You don't know.
Yes, indeed. And Dr. Drake, you are a public speaker. You go around and you speak on this to empower audiences and probably your colleagues as well. You know, what is the theme? What is the message that you're putting out there now so that we can maybe see a change in the next 20, 30 years? What's the message so that we would get this right, hopefully?
I tell the young medical students always, every lecture I give to them, I either usually start it, or end it with this one point. Medicine, a disease is not a deficiency of a medication. Just keep that in your mind for a minute. A disease is not a deficiency of a medication. So to think a patient walks into your office and starts saying, "Doc, you know, my eyes hurt," right? And you say, "Okay, here's a pain medicine prescription." That's not how you treat a problem anymore.
Right.
Those days are over. You now got to find out, why is your head hurting?
Sure.
Because it may be from something as simple as a toothache, or something as simple as, something simple, or it could be something complicated like a tumor in your brain.
Sure.
So you just don't treat them for the headache.
Right.
You try to find out why there's a headache. And that's true for every other complaint. You know what I'm saying? And in the old days, medicine was you walk in, you have a complaint, they write your prescription.
Yeah.
Those days are done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And prescriptions are outrageously in price these
Those
days.
days are done.
And what is your take on this new, maybe not new, but something that we're hearing a lot more about, and that is functional medicine.
What kind of medicine?
Functional medicine.
Functional.
Okay, and I could tell you what it is that happened when the work was done with me. They brought me in and they tested my blood for everything. They tested me for all of the allergies. They tested for my ability to absorb every and anything, and so on. So all of these tests were done in order to prepare me for a regimen that they were putting me on. And it really is it's lifestyle, because it was across the board.
Exactly.
There were many changes. And I think that's the direction probably that you're talking about. It's not
Right.
just drop a pill on somebody, but let's go through it and let's make the lifestyle changes that we need to make in order that we would be able to improve this person's life holistically as opposed to pharmaceutically.
Right.
But how is the medical industry going to survive? How is the pharmaceutical industry going to survive
I
if we
got news
shift?
for you. Medicare, CMS, is that government agency that pays for people over 65.
Yes.
And they now have codes that you can bill for giving people advice on foods. I'm sure you saw once in that hospital in the Bronx, can't remember the name of it, where there was a patient being discharged and the doctors went with the patient to the market
Oh, yeah.
so they can pick the foods that the patient was going to be on. Medicare will now pay for that. They have
Okay.
at least 2 or 3 codes where they will pay for lifestyle advice and nutritional counseling. That's never happened before. So it is changing.
Okay.
It is changing.
Okay, that's a good thing. We had Dr. Drake on yesterday. No, Dr. Drake, I'm sorry, we had you on today. That, what is the way that we would get in contact with you?
There are many ways.
Okay.
Don't send a carrier pigeon. We're a little
Back
bit
in the
beyond
day,
that.
right?
But, you can reach me by phone,
What's that number?
301-356-5035.
Say that one more time for us.
301-356-5035.
Great.
You can reach me by email
Mm-hmm.
at duandrakes@yahoo.com.
Okay.
Those are the two best ways.
Okay,
You
great.
can try to carry a pigeon, but I may not get it.
Yes. Yeah, I was just thinking about the doctor. His name is similar to yours that we had on yesterday. He was talking about life, and we're always trying to figure this thing out, to sort it out, so that we can zero in on the best path for us, so that we can improve our quality of life and extend our lives. So that's real important for us here. And I want to thank you, for coming on. One, for doing the work that you have done, because the work that you have done has led to you becoming the person and being able to affect the lives of the people that you have thus far. And Ramonda, I'm not sure whether you might have another question for him before we get his final comments. Having been on the show, I just wanted to, again, thank you. Ramonda, go ahead. You have something you want to say or ask? Of course you do, because you're so full of conversation.
Oh my goodness, I'm just truly elated, considering that all the knowledge that you have, that you've given to everyone, because like I say, diet is truly important. I can't express it enough.
Thoracic, I'm going to jump in.
Sure.
I'm going to ask one of Ramonda's questions. So what about women's health? I know you deal with the cardiology and you deal with the thoracic, but what's going on with women's health? Black women are getting hysterectomies and endometriosis,
Right.
and all kinds of
And
surgeries and
menopause also.
procedures, and also their cycle. A black woman's cycle is seemingly different than all other cultures. What are we looking at as the cause?
Whoa.
And
That's a
we're gonna make
huge
that
story.
your wait. Well, go
Let me
ahead,
tell you,
wrap it up for
That's
us.
a huge story, because the foods you eat, again, are so filled with hormones.
Yes.
For instance, bovine serum albumin. You would not think that you were getting it, but if you drink milk, you get it. And so there are other things called estrogen mimics, like the stuff in the plastics,
Yes.
the phthalates, and those kinds of things, and plastics are estrogen mimics. And then there's something called estrogen inhibitors. They all come from the synthetic manufacture of things. You cook in a pot at home made with Teflon, you probably get some estrogen mimics
Yes.
or estrogen inhibitors
Yes.
in your food. And if you constantly expose yourself to that, it's going to interfere with your regular cycle, and so you run into problems. So it's everywhere. You cannot sell a carpet in this country without having it flame retarded.
Right.
Flame retardant made from chemicals that leach out of the carpet into your room all day for the next 20
Right. You're
years.
breathing it.
And
all
your
day.
body have to react to
Yeah.
that.
You're
And
walking on it, breathing
exactly.
it.
And it blocks your hormones. Some of the chemicals in the water you drink. For instance, most waters have chlorine. I know they put what's that thing to stop cavities?
Fluoride.
Fluoride. But fluoride, chloride, bromide, and iodide are all from the same family of chemicals. Your body needs iodide to make the thyroid hormone. When you get too much chloride or fluoride or bromide, it blocks iodide. So you don't make enough hormone. So you become hypothyroid or hypothyroid, and you don't even know why.
And then
Because
you
your
have those
body's
people that are allergic
exposed.
to iodine.
Exactly.
Things of that nature.
So we live in an insane situation. We heard about the lead in Flint, Michigan. There's lead here.
Yep.
But there's other things worse than the lead. There's, as I said, there's fluoride. And some countries don't allow fluoride, like in Europe. There's no fluoride in the water.
Right.
And they have less cavities than we do.
Right.
Now,
So-
what would you recommend for females that are going through menopause, though, opposed to the estrogen medicine that they want to put you on?
No, that estrogen medicine they put you on is from a horse, by the
Right.
way.
And horse.
It's horse estrogen.
Yes.
And you don't want to be necessarily
It's
on
urine
that.
from a horse, correct? It's
Right.
made with urine?
You gotta
Okay.
stick it in the horse urine, and the hormone in the urine is then extracted.
Okay.
And that's put in your thing. But there's some plant stuffs that help. Estrogen, Mexican wild yams. There are certain foods that would help that, clearly. And you can find in most health food stores, they have those. And one of them is something called estroven. It's from a plant.
Okay.
There's one called Mexican wild yams. That's also it's a regular kind of a yam or potato that they take the skin and it has hormone. And there are a couple others that you can get to help that process. But I would advise you when they come with the horse urine extract,
Right. Don't take it.
no,
No.
let
I
it go.
refuse. I
And
refuse.
just remember this: if you live a healthy lifestyle and you eat real food, I'm talking about
Yes.
real food,
Yes.
not synthetic food.
Right.
Eat real food, not too much. primarily a plant-based diet, and you keep your body moving, your body will take care of everything all on its own. That's what it's designed for.
When
It's
Dr. Bruce
designed
helped
to
me,
fix
and
things.
because I had asked him what should I do, and he was telling me that certain things to take out of my diet, and I noticed that once I took out, well, I was having hot flashes at one point in time, and once I stopped eating cheese, the hot flashes just disappeared.
Because what is cheese made from?
Milk. And
And
I
milk-
don't drink milk, but I would like cheese,
Right.
but I don't drink milk at
And most
all.
people make that mistake. They don't drink the milk, but then they eat cheese
Right.
or they eat
That was
yogurt or
myself.
ice cream.
Right.
Just remember this, that bovine serum albumin is the stuff they inject in the cows to make them keep making milk.
Right.
Normally
Right.
animals only make milk when they're pregnant.
Right,
Right.
And
exactly.
when they're having a baby.
Right.
But they inject these cows every day to
Yes.
keep them making milk for years. So they have a lot of bovine serum albumin plus many other things like
Right.
the casein protein that we
Yeah.
talk about,
Right.
which when it's broken down can form almost anything.
Right.
And so you'll have a problem just messing with milk products.
And then they have them hooked up to the machine, right?
That's
like
what they do.
24
It's
hours a
disgusting.
day.
Have you ever seen that?
Yes, that's what I was gonna. I couldn't wait to say that, but they have them hooked up to the machine where they're milking them 24 hours a day, giving them that medication to produce milk over and over and over. But what's going in there also is their nipples and things are sore.
Bacteria.
The blood, the pus,
Thank you.
all of
Blood,
that is
pus,
going,
and urine,
yes,
and
it's all
fecal
going
matter.
into the milk.
Mhm.
And I'm like, it's no way I
Yep.
can drink milk
No.
ever again. After seeing this
No.
was a major turnoff, and I said no, I couldn't even put that in my body.
I
It
was
just
lucky.
nasty.
I was lactose intolerant since I was a kid.
Right.
Okay.
At about 7 or 8, I never touched milk again,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
not even in ice cream form.
That's it.
So I never was a milk drinker.
That's it.
So I have no taste for milk
For milk,
myself.
right, right.
Dr. Drake, we've enjoyed you. You,
Absolutely.
again, are a phenomenal teacher, and hopefully those of you in the viewing audience, listening audience, will take advantage of his services, bring him into your church, community center, fly him to your island resort where everybody
Yes.
needs to
Yes.
learn.
Yes.
Yes.
He said yes.
And I'll come with him, of course.
So will I.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, my
But
goodness.
we've really appreciated the energy that you brought to the show today, and prayerfully those in the audience have learned something and will be able to carry that through and activate that for the rest of their lives. And we
Do
look
have
forward to
time for
having
one
you
more
back
thing
on.
to ask him?
One more thing, just one more thing.
What if, I'm sorry. What about the teeth whitening? What do you consider? I mean, I know your teeth are absolutely white, but
The strips.
they're using these days. I mean, and I've heard that it leaves your teeth so sensitive. I guess because it's taking out
Don't
things
do
that
it. Don't do it. You can. The thing I would do is to brush your teeth a couple of times a day. You don't have to do it 5 and 6 times, just twice a day. In fact, the one thing that will whiten your teeth after 2 tries, you may not believe this, is ashes,
ashes.
charcoal.
Oh wow.
I know it sounds weird,
Well,
but
how do you go about using that to put it on your? Do you just put it on your teeth?
no,
I mean,
my
how do you do
dad
it?
used to do it.
And how did he do it? What did he do?
He would just get, like how you go to barbecue something with some wood to get the charcoal and brush your teeth.
Oh wow.
But now you can buy charcoal in the store.
Okay.
Got to have medical charcoal. To have charcoal you can take to help absorb. In the hospital, if you show up in the hospital right now and you had ingested some poisonous stuff,
Right.
the
Right.
first thing they give you
Right.
is charcoal.
Charcoal. Right.
Because it absorbs everything.
Everything, yes.
You put it on your teeth once or twice a day and brush your teeth. In 2 days, your teeth be white as stuff.
There you go.
All right.
Dr. Duan Drakes, again, thank you very
So
much.
informative. We love it.
For coming on the show. We're not done. We've got some great show left and got guests that are going to be coming on with us. But Dr. Drakes, we really appreciate you coming on board, and we look forward to having you back. So don't go far, don't go to that island resort yet.
Without us. Look.
Thank you for having me, and please invite me anytime. Just give me a little notice.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Really
you.
been a
Thank you.
pleasure.
And we're going to be right back with more of the Health Literacy Show with Dr. Baruch and Halise. You all stay tuned.